Cool. Hello, everybody. Welcome to a slightly different room at FanDuel. Thank you for putting up with the slightly difficult wait list that we've had. I had to limit the numbers because we're in a different room tonight. And if you have a hybrid event and meetup, then it doesn't allow you to have a wait list. So thank you for your patience if you were kind of struggling at the last moment to get a ticket. We are live on YouTube, streaming on the Scottish Technology Club YouTube channel. And just before we get started, I'd like to say a few words of thanks. The first one is to FanDuel, to Ali, Kieran, and Fiona for their help in sorting out the venue and hosting us every month is really appreciated. Scotland are sponsoring both us and EdinburghJS for the live stream for a few months. So we really appreciate their help. We do get a reasonable audience on YouTube now, and it's nice that people are able to join us from the comfort of their home. So thank you to Scotland and Nicola there. And lastly, thank you to 2i Testing. Craig, who's here from 2i Testing, is just going to tell us a little bit about what they do, just like a 30-second thing, so that you can all know about it. So.
Yeah, I'm Craig from 2i Testing. So 2i Testing, we're a testing company. We have about 60 engineers at the moment. We are about 60 engineers at the moment. We're working across like a number of different sectors in the UK. Predominantly automation testing. I don't know if you've seen on LinkedIn, we've won a few awards from various bits and pieces. We developed a pretty major test data generator, so it was pretty big for us. Yeah, I'm not sure too much what to say.
You're in Codebase, are you? Where's your offices?
Offices are on George Street.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Nice.
Yep.
Cool. Anyway, it's good to know who's in the community.
Thank
you to Craig, and thank you to all our sponsors. I think I really appreciate people coming forward with a bit of sponsorship, because it takes a bit of money to organise these events. You know, the beer, the pizza, they don't come for free, neither does the meetup group. So it's really appreciated when people step up, and what that means is feel free to email me telling me you're going to give us some money for this, or email your boss or whatever. Cool, so we've got two speakers tonight. And the kind of theme for the evening is kind of like open source software and frameworks that you might want to use. So I'm quite excited about this evening because we get to hear about it from people who are involved in those communities. The first speaker of the evening is going to talk about his experiences with the Astro framework, which I have been banging on about for a few months, if anyone's coming to some of the events. And that's Fuzzy. Please take it away. Cheers.
Oh, that's the way around. How are we all? Doing good, yeah? Good. Right, just a wee second, guys, and I'll get set up, and we should be good. Right, and there we go. Waka waka waka, y'all. My name's Fuzzy. Right, well, everybody knows me online and in work, right, as a fuzzy bear, right? I'm core member of the Astro project team, the core member of the Astro framework. Former community manager for Astro. For the past year, I've been working for the Linux Foundation, part of their platform engineering team. So it's been one hell of a ride, especially in open source. I'm here to basically, actually, hands up, who's heard of Astro, the framework? Wow. Right, keep your hands up if you actually used Astro. About a dozen, that's good, right? Who's got anything in production? Who's got anything out live right now? My man, right? That's good, we've got one astronaut, so I've actually got a little sticker for you, dude, right? Just to say congratulations, you're an actual astronaut. So hopefully all the rest of you, I'm going to call you cadets.
Instructions from the video guy.
Oh, yeah, no problem.
We're going to put that there.
Got you.
In or out? In there. Perfect.
Perfect. Yep. There we go. Sorry, I didn't realise I was flying north south there for a wee second. Right, so my job as the community manager at Astro was to basically help onboard as many people onto the framework as possible. Now, the framework has literally had its third birthday on Friday there, right? So it's 3 years old, and in the course of those past 3 years, sorry. Oh, that's all right.
Squeeze in inside, guys.
Yep.
It's easier when you have a room that you can come into.
I know, it's nice. It's nice. I mean, I remember me walking through at uni, and it's kind of like this, and the doors are right at the front, and you had to make all the way up to the back, and you're the last one in, 15 minutes late. So yeah, that was, yeah.
There's a couple spots here as well.
There's some space down here as well, my friend. But yeah, so my job with Astro was basically to help onboard as many people into the Astro framework, right? Now, fair enough, not many people here are familiar with Astro, what it does, it's like, etc. The way I like to call people is, when you come into Astro, it's your space cadets in the sense that everybody likes to build on the web, right? And so, in that sense of regards, we're kind of free and liberal and creative, right? So this is what I'm here to do, is to give you a one-on-one training into Astro, and hopefully by the end of this, give you enough information that you could pretty much pick up Astro in a day, a week, from now. You'll have the core understanding of what Astro, the framework, does and how you could best use it for your own projects, okay? Now, before we go and launch ourselves into space, there is a small bit of pretext and history that I need to give you first of all, okay? This is an image from the State of JavaScript report, the most recent one, right, from 2022. 2023 is currently being compiled at the moment, so once that data gets released, it'll be really interesting to see how this graph in particular has changed. Now, this is the percentage of retention when it comes to like frameworks. Now, the one thing that I would like you to all kind of like focus on is not the numbers and all the stuff in the between, is what happened back here in 2016 when we literally started life in web development with 4 key players in the web framework world. Through that time, we have seen nothing more than an evolution and amazing frameworks coming into the space, right, to help address particular concerns and problems in the web development space. Every single one of these frameworks here are fantastic in their own right, okay? And it's amazing to see, especially in the last 3 years, 4 years, right, the amount of frameworks that have recently came about, okay? Now, this is the space of web development at the start of 2022, okay? Now, given that has been said, right, each one of the aforementioned libraries have, on the previous slide, they all have their own unique ways of expressing themselves. They've got their own abstractions, they've got their own mannerisms, right? And these mannerisms get coalesced into their own meta frameworks. For instance, React has Next.js, they also have Remix, they also have Million, which is a couple, they've got a number of them out there, right? Vue has Nuxt.js, right? Now, I'm really looking forward to seeing Daniel's talk on Nuxt later on today, right? We are really, honestly, pleasure to have Daniel here with us. He's an amazing developer, does a lot in the ecosystem. Now, fundamentally, web development isn't rocket science. Rocket science is simple, right? When it comes to web development, it's like, it could be anything short, right? However, given with the right space, the right tools, we believe anyone can flourish and build and present their content in ways that are just amazing, right? And we like to simplify all the complexity that comes with it. Now, without further ado, let me introduce to you now the framework that I'm here to talk to you about, Astro, okay? This one here was actually developed by one of our community members, right, who was playing about with Blender one day, right, and he came up with this fantastic bit of art, right? And that is it. Astronauts are all about art. Astro is all about helping you create that art online. Now, this is astro.build. If anybody was to check out Astro Live, this is our homepage, right? It has been reimagined and redesigned over the past 3 years, okay? Now, the people who are using Astro are the aforementioned, but there's things like, there's the internet service provider who now thinks that they could toss people into space. You know, there's a big blue hut, right, that basically provides furniture. They're also using Astro as well. Stock exchange markets are using Astro. You know, might hear a big one called Bloomberg, etc. There's a number of people who are already using Astro in production out there live to service millions of users, okay? Now, Astro is the one framework to basically rule them all in this sense, right? The story of content-driven sites has been kind of evaporated over the past 6 years, with the advent of web apps. And Astro has brought back content sites and the delivery of amazing content really fast, really quickly. Now, like I said, Astro is a one meta framework that brings together a lot of these possibilities, right? And so, with that being said, if anybody ever wishes to spin up and get started with Astro, you can do that if you've got your laptops here with you today and you just want to geek out instead of listening to me talk. Go to astro.new, right? You can spin up and play with Astro in the browser. Thanks to amazing work from StackBlitz, who have now got Node working in the browser, you know, with the Web Containers API, we are now able to actually develop, as web developers, guys, we can develop live in the browser without actually needing a local development machine anymore. The web is such an interesting and innovative time to be involved in right now. It's insane. Now, the Astro Docs project is the coalescence of community-driven support and innovation. This is the Astro Bible now. So if any one of you astronauts ever get stuck or forget what I've spoken to here about today, you'll find it all littered about in the Astro Docs. Okay, it's supported in, I believe, 9 different languages. As soon as one page gets updated in this, there is translations done in Spanish, Portuguese, German, Japanese, legit. The translation team is community driven and they are amazing, a bunch of people, right? Astro is all about community engagement and community involvement. Now, let me just tell you quickly about what powers Astro underneath the hood, right? Just so you can understand where the speed comes from, right? Underneath the hood, we use Vite. Anybody heard of Vite? Number of yous, right? You're pretty familiar then that Vite gives you amazing dev experience, hot module reloading out the box, etc., right? When it comes to the build pipeline, it's fantastic. It's so augmentable that it allows us to build on top of it, okay? And Astro has a great relationship with the Vite team, and we wish them nothing but success. It's also powered by ES Build, which is by Evan Wallace, right? Now, this guy's a one-man mission, right, to make the web faster, right? Underneath all of that is powered by the Go language as well. The Astro compiler itself is a special standalone compiler that compiles all your Astro files. I'll get to that in a wee second. But that itself is powered by the Go compiler, so it can basically compile, pardon my language, a shit ton of Astro files and pages very, very quickly. Astro is server-rendered HTML by default, and HTML is the fastest way to deliver content to any client on the web. The web was made for HTML, okay? So I just want to keep this understanding basic. It is nothing but HTML, guys, that we send to the client. Static sites from Astro, pure HTML. And with that, there is 0 kilobytes of JavaScript that gets sent as well. So what you get is really fast content delivered sites almost instantly, right? Without the bloat that goes with it. Now, there is something that we do that we've kind of like coined and implemented at Astro, right? And we were probably the first to do this at a framework level, at a big level, right? And that was introduce island architecture. Now, there's a saying, no one's an island. Sure shit, your components can be, okay? Because when you think about it, your components should be, in the microservice term of the word, as monomeric as possible, right? Now, previously there was a speaker here last time, right, who gave an amazing talk on island architecture. However, island architecture was first coined by a developer called Jason Miller in the web development ecosystem. Anybody heard of this guy? Yeah, he's the core maintainer of the Preact library, right? Now, Preact is a more performant version of the React library that everybody's heard of, right? However, when it came, coalesced the idea into this seminal blog post here, and I highly recommend people taking a wee look back in time to read this, right? The fundamental argument of island architecture is that 9/10 of your site is static, right? So if you could just have those highly dynamic regions on your site that allows for only that bit of interactivity, those become encapsulated in their own little boundaries and their own little islands, okay? Simple, right? And I really want to highlight the last month's chat by Joseph. Is he here? Is Joseph here? No? That's a shame, because I really got my wee ticket as well, a wee sticker, because this was a fantastic talk on Astro Island architecture. He goes really deep, he goes really well, right? And without me rehashing and giving you the full demo experience that Joseph did, highly recommend taking a wee look at the previous month's live stream that was done here. Now, all this basically means that we give you amazing HTML first. Accessibility comes out of the box when you consider writing in nothing but HTML. You start thinking about, the ARIA tags and the accessibility. Accessibility is a legal requirement now. If you don't consider it, you're putting yourselves at risk, right? As a treat, SEO is naturally through the roof. These things are just made for Google, right? And as I said earlier, zero JavaScript by default. So the performance and the load times are amazing. Now, some of you are probably thinking, well, if you're not talking about JavaScript, then what about interactivity? How do we make our sites nice and clicky and fancy and, have confetti whenever we want it, okay? Well, with Island architecture, we introduced this other concept called partial hydration. Now, does it load it? Everything apart from the R, right? So, in a sense, this is what partial hydration kind of represents, right? Things coming in at different increments being activated at different times. However, that data still gets put there first, right? And then it becomes active, okay? I do apologize. It actually looks really cool on my screen, but yes, partial hydration. And yeah, when I was first introduced to it, this was my reaction as well. And there's a couple of you that look like this as well, just looking at my point of view here, right? And it can best be summed up in this really simple meme, right? Think about watering a plant. There's an equilibrium, there's a fine point in terms of how much moisture or water that plant needs in order to survive, right? Partial hydration is the similar equation here, is in the similar vein, right? You don't need too much to make your websites bloated and fat. You don't need too little where you're giving your end users really poor experiences. So what we tend to see when we build our apps or we build our sites in Next.js, etc., everything tends to require JavaScript, both on the server now with Next.js's recent server components. And then we have also got, just generally speaking, that stuff needs to be hydrated back on the client anyway. So generally speaking, we're sending nothing but JavaScript at this point, okay? Now there's points here, it's like for instance, the title doesn't need to be, rendered in JavaScript. That's static HTML, that's just a H1 tag, if you get where I'm going with this, right? Now, as I said, what doesn't need JavaScript doesn't need JavaScript. What does need JavaScript, you can specify when and where you want that JavaScript to run, okay? Now, there is ways that we give you this ability in Astro, and this is through the client directives, okay? These client directives are really, really powerful, okay? They allow you to specify when and where you want these directives to run, okay? So you, the developer, have control over your JavaScript in terms of when and where you want that piece of code to run, okay? Now, there is only 5 directives, right? Guys, there's a famous rule, right? There's a quote by a man from Bernabrock, right, who done fractalism. From simplicity derives complexity, okay? So at Astro, we like to keep things simple because it allows you guys to make such amazing things, all right? These directives, just to quickly go over it with you, you have your client idle, right, which is as it says, right? When the main thread becomes idle, load this bit of JavaScript. Going through it, client load, right? It's pretty much done when the document loads, right? You've got your media directives. Now these fly off whenever your particular media directives, so think buttons or mobiles, okay? Client only, now this is an escape hatch to let other people jump out of Astro, right? And is to jump out and go, you know what, just send everything straight to the browser, right? And forget about it. And we've got the client visible, everybody's favorite. Now this is when the component scrolls up to the viewport and becomes visible to the viewport, right? Using the browser. Now every browser's got this, a set of performance APIs, right? And the intersection observer API is what powers the client visible directive. Now, coming back to this little conceptualization of what a wireframe site looks like with Astro, right? And how we start putting in little directives, say we want our header, right? That's got, toggle dark mode theme in it. It's a small little bit of JavaScript, but we still need it, right? So that happens on load because we do need that interactivity straight away. We've got the client sidebar, right? That can happen on idle because the probability of the client hitting the sidebar straight away is very slim, right? So as soon as the thread is free, it's probably going to be quicker before the client can scroll the mouse to the sidebar at that point. And then we've got our image carousel. Now, this could be hidden down below the viewport, below, the fold. And when it becomes below the fold, then that JavaScript's never going to get loaded. The HTML is sent to the client, right? But the JavaScript's never going to get loaded until that pops back into the viewport, and then boom, your carousel is instantly interactive. Now, I legit have these glasses with me, right? It's the John Lennon glasses, right? Now, I just want you all to put them on for a wee second, okay? Imagine this kind of weird construct where you're able to bring all your favorite frameworks to the party, okay? Now, this is just a small representation of the frameworks that Astro supports. We support 9 of them from the top of my recollection, right? And the whole idea is so when I said right at the very start, each framework comes with your own particular meta stack, right? You don't really need to because these are all each fantastic UI libraries. They all have their own powerful ecosystems, communities, plugins, tools that you can then leverage. You can leverage a Vue dev tool. You can find something in Svelte, you can find something in React, right? You're no longer limited to just that ecosystem by that library because that is what you chose right at the start of your project. Another point is, if you're a company, just think about it from a development team's point of view or a design agency's point of view, right? You're now able to hire more specialized developers and bring them on into your team to work on your projects almost instantly because that onboarding time is gone. They don't need to jump from Vue to go into Solid. They can still work on their Vue code and still contribute to the project, right? Just simplifying it and allowing everybody to come to the table has allowed us over the past 3 years to see some truly innovative art in this space. Now, this is possible, this absolute madness that you're seeing here, right? Now, I bet many never thought you could actually do something quite like this. Now, just to summarize what we've got going on here, right? We've got 5 different frameworks and just client-side JavaScript here, right? Now, you can see which ones correlates to all of them, and you wouldn't really need them, but I mean, for instance, inside here, this is possible, a Preact component with a Vue component embedded in that. There is no framework possible or out there that gives you this. And it's all about customization, it's all about flexibility, right? And so all of this at the end of the day takes average Lighthouse performance scores and sends them through the moon, okay? Now, when it comes to the average page load performance based on general competitors, naturally, when it comes to the likes of WordPress and Next.js, guys, no offense, but Astro is in a different galaxy. It's a parsec ahead of the competition in this respects. Now, this here is the hyperdrive speedometer. This was set up by Chris. My colleague, really, really great guy. Part of the core team, focuses on community experience, docs, a lot, right? And he does a lot. And this was one of his early projects, which basically took all the sample Astro sites. There's like 620 sites listed here. All sharing number one is 120 sites, all sharing number one, the top spot here, right? So it's like, this is just to demonstrate of a sample set of 600, and the difference between top and 621 is not that much, right? So the distance is, the delta is very small, and in the sample set, the performance gains demonstrated is very high. So now, guys, I want you to really pay attention, okay? Because this is where I start teaching you all about Astro. So this is going from the Astro component file right the way through, okay? So if you all wanna, if you're all interested, I hope by now, in what the Astro framework can offer you, right? And really like show you what the Astro syntax is all about, right? This is it. Because after this, guys, nothing is as complicated anymore, okay? The Astro.astro file, right, is a single, what do they call it? A single file components? Yeah, single file components, right? And this is basically, the concept is to co-locate everything together. So when I say everything, right, it is taking your HTML, your styling, and any interactivity that you have, and putting them together on the same page, okay? Now, the real benefit that this gives you is what I found is from maintainability purposes, right? It makes it so much easier now to have all my code for this particular component in the one central place. I can make any changes to now, right? That is powerful in itself. I'm not having to jump between style sheets, different JavaScript files, figure out what's pointing to what. Nah, sod it, co-locate everything, right? And we speak the language of the web as well. So if you know your HTML, your CSS, your JavaScript, you can develop in Astro. You don't need anything else, okay? That is the point that I would like to make here. Now, a quick overview of the Astro syntax. It is broken up, like I said, there's 4 parts to this really, right? There's the top part in the blue, the Astro front matter. Now, we're going to go into this in a wee bit of detail here, right? The bit in blue, the right at the top is signified by these 3 little dashes, right? Down here, right? And these dashes basically represent a particular boundary at the top of your file that allows Astro to do the server-side stuff, okay? So this is the code that is ran either at build time or at request time, okay? So if you think about it, this is the code that is at the top of each page. So every .astro file follows a structure, guys, okay? So it's either if it's a component, a layout, or a page, right? Come to that, right? So here, any code that you write in here, you have top level await, so you can do your data fetching, right? You can connect to any backend API that you want to, and you got that there, right? TypeScript, JavaScript, supported by default. Astro is extremely type safe and type friendly. Like, it does my head in. For those who don't like JavaScript or on the fence about JavaScript, TypeScript kind of thing, you know, it's like, sometimes types can get in the way, but sometimes there's just any, right? But yeah, this is me just pulling a little random Chuck Norris joke, right? And this joke that you just see down here, right, is pretty much printed in the console, right, of the terminal, okay? Not in the browser, straight in the terminal, right? So any code that is printed in the Astro front matter is ran on the server. The second part, the main chunk of it, is the templating side of things, okay? Astro basically brings back HTML, right, as your templating language, right? None of this Ninja, Jinja, Pug, whatever have you, right? We give you simple HTML along with JSX. Now, if those who don't know what JSX is basically JavaScript expressions that returns HTML, okay? So you can run your JavaScript, so long as you run return HTML, it's not a JavaScript function because JavaScript doesn't return HTML, JSX does, right? And that's what we're seeing here. inside these little curly brackets, you're effectively creating little punch holes, right? To say at this point, I'm doing some magic. And with that magic, I could do that in JavaScript or TypeScript, okay? Now, we also scope styles. So you can have all your styles scoped directly to either that component, that layout, or that page. Now, layouts are shared, remember, right? So it's like all the styles. Now, this could be written in either CSS, Sass, Less, whatever styling pre-processing language you wish to use. It's even got native Tailwind support for those who are probably wondering, I don't know how to style, I just know Tailwind, right? So yeah, it's got deep native Tailwind support for you as well, okay? And then for those who are wondering, how does our styles compile? This is what happens just underneath the hood. It's really interesting to see what we're doing here. We're effectively just scoping it to the data attributes, right? And these data attributes are scoped directly to your components, okay? Lastly, of the Astro syntax is the client-side JavaScript that normally gets stuck at the end of the file, okay? And the one thing I would like to say is that client-side JavaScript doesn't need any directives, okay? It doesn't need a UI renderer. We don't need to tell it when and when, right? It's just sent, okay? Now, in the script tag, without doing any modifications, you can even get away with writing TypeScript. We'll take that away, we'll bundle it, we'll ship it, and we'll compress it and do everything that you want with it. Everything expected is what I'm trying to say, right? And if you had a console login here, this will print to the browser. This will be sent to the client. Okay? So just to go back through all of this, guys, right? Server-side code in the Astro front matter, HTML in the middle with JSX for your templating, styling, client-side JavaScript, the Astro syntax file. Co-locates all four main parts, right, that you need as a web developer into the single place, okay? Now, I hope when anybody sees the Astro file from now on, they pretty much know what they're going to be looking at. And this is, for me, one of the best reasons why Astro still wins for our framework for me. Web Components is a first-class citizen in Astro, okay? Basically meaning, this code here will run for the length of time the internet is about. If I don't need to modify it, I don't need to change it. This will go for time and tomorrow. Web Components is part of the web standard. Use frameworks when you need to, but there is actual alternative options out there for you guys. Web Components is a good one. Developer experience, very tricky. APIs, pain in the ass, but part of my language and my feelings on Web Components, right? But getting that into Astro was a big win for us, right? This is where you can find out more information about the Astro syntax and everything that I've just went over with you. To be honest, you're pretty much up to speed with the Astro syntax file now, okay? Project structure. Now, most people get confused by this. They think the entire project is owned by Astro. That's wrong. Only the source directory is owned by us. And when I say owned, that is everything. This is where we look at, right, when it comes to building your application, your source code, right, is in that SRC folder, right? Now, this contains your pages, your layouts, your Astro components, your UI components. It would also contain any pages of Markdown that you have, okay? Yes, Astro renders Markdown and serves them as routes, right? So if you had a Markdown page, there you go. There's a straight HTML route that you could use, okay? Now, I just want to make that point clear here, right, with the pages and the posts with the Markdown, because these will then be rendered as /post, paid /post, /post1, etc., right? And so that is, Markdown as endpoints. A few tips on the component directories that I like to basically just mention. It's really one key tip that I would like to share with you all. When you're managing your components directory, there is, like I've shown you, the ability for you to do absolute insanity in Astro is there, right? However, insanity is only fun if it's somewhat controlled, right? And so when you are choosing to have multiple UI frameworks within your code base, All I would suggest and strongly recommend is that you group these UI components based on their actual UI library. So here is like in the source directory, we have the components folder broken down into Preact, Svelte, Vue, React, etc. And just by having that there, it informs the bundling process, and when it comes to building the Astro project, where everything is somewhat better. Because, yeah, if anybody ever works with type aliases, things can get somewhat confusing with, with the language servers, etc. Right? So that is probably the only tip that I'll give you when it comes to your components directory. Okay. The next one is the Astro Globals API. Legit, guys. This is your Swiss Army knife, your tool belt when you're lost deep in space and stuck, trying to figure out what to do. The Astro Globals is there to actually help you. It gives you some unique superpowers as well. And there's 3 that I would like to go over in particular, right? Because the first 2 are, are just, covers a fair bit. The first one is the Astro Props, second one is Astro Slots. The last one is my favorite one, is the Astro Self, right? And there is at heart 18 APIs. There's 34, I believe, actual APIs throughout, including APIs that tie into the integrations API and tie into the build API, etc. There's different specialized APIs. However, the Astro Globals are available to you through in every Astro file and only in Astro files. The amount of times I've seen people actually use astro.glob. Astro.glob grabs all the files within all your directories. You just need to give it like a place to go get me all my markdown files, and it'll go glob all your markdown files for you, okay? But when we see Astro being used in TypeScript files, right, we keep saying to the guys, it's like, listen guys, I know it's great and it's really convenient, but there is other helpers for that you have to go back to the native stuff, right? So it's like here with the astro.props is how we pass in properties and data into our components, into our pages, into our layouts. And it's through the astro.props direct API, okay? Now, all props, if you export them from your file using the export interface, right, props, using TypeScript, just declare the contract for the props that you wish to have for that particular component, page layout, right? And that will basically be percolated through the language server and be able to be presented to you. So when you go to use your heading, you know it's going to accept both time and date as your properties, because that will be surfaced to you, okay? And so that is the Astro props. Passing data into your components, astro.props, right? And you can type safe them, right? Next up is the Astro slots. Slots is basically the simplest way of passing in children into your Astro components, right? Or into your Astro files, right? So just slot it in there is a good way of remembering how slot works, okay? Now, what we basically are doing here is we have a wrapper component, right? It's going to take in several different components and bring it all together. And we just want to fill this part in with data coming in from an external source down here on the page level, right? So down here in the body, you probably, don't know if you can see it up the back there, right? But yeah, there's the body that I'm sending into the actual wrapper is sent as a slot. So we're just sending in the HTML or whatever UI component as natural in there, right? Next up, we have name slots. So this is the concept of slots, right? Taking it a wee bit further, okay? So you now have name slots. So basically, if you wanted to specify exactly where you want that bit of UI to get sent to, you can do. Just name it and tell it where it wants to go. There's new home, and that's where it will find it, okay? Sorry guys, I need to take a wee bit of Iron Brew. I need a bit of fuel. Fuzzy's fueled by Iron Brew. Right, this one here is my favorite one. It's probably the most powerful out of the 18, right? This allows you to recursively call your Astro components, right? To basically keep repeating itself until that data structure is done. So imagine you have an array with arrays within arrays, okay? And you want to keep rendering all that through and all that. So every time it hits another array, you want it to keep just redo itself, right? Normally speaking, there's other patterns that you can use to do this. They were all very difficult up until we managed to get astro.self part of the API, and I was like, this is a win for me. Like, seriously, this was a wee win. But yeah, legit. You just pass in the array, astro.self as a component, and then it will just go off and recall itself recursively until that data structure is exhausted, right? Really, really powerful. And the amount of times I've seen people create recursive components without realizing they could use astro.self is insane. So this is the one reason why I bring this up, right? It's one of the most powerful APIs there, right? Now, the Astro API reference page references all the APIs in a single place. Legit, guys, this is the toolkit. This is the holy, whatever you want to call it, this is where you will go check it out, okay? And like I said, there's about 34 different APIs in general. I've just shown you 3 out of the 18 most powerful ones. Now, we're making good progress. Layouts, right? The message I want to give you when it comes to layouts is split your templates up as much as possible. At this point, I hope you could understand and appreciate that Astro is very modular when it comes to how we do things, okay? Given the syntax and the co-location and the way that things are working, right? We've got the project directory, components, layouts, pages, right? Extremely modular, right? And when it comes to this is what a layout looks like. On the left-hand side, we have the template. HTML and JSX, like I've just introduced to you. By now, guys, right, I'm looking at you, none of this code looks daunting or surprising anymore. This is just stuff that everybody can read and recognize now, okay? And that is a huge part to, you know, understanding and developing, in my opinion, right? Is being able to does this look foreign to me? Am I scared by this now, right? And so by this point, you have your entire template sketched out in HTML and JSX, and in your pages directory at Astro, we literally just call it in like a component and drop it in as a slot, right? This is how we deliver data in front matter and markdown as routes, okay? So you can have your entire markdown content. For those who don't like to write HTML, I mean, who does that, right? So when it comes to like your actual layout, all you need to do is just specify right at the top of your front matter in markdown, right, what layout you wish to use. And Astro will inject the rest of the markdown inside that layout for you. Pages, fun, right? Now this is where things get, you know it's serious when you start seeing bullet points on a screen, right? Like legit, that's how but there was, for the next couple of times that you see this, apologies, I couldn't do it any other way. I've tried, right? I just want to basically share with you that inside the pages directory, you don't only need to use Astro files inside the pages directory. You have the ability to do so much more, right? You can throw your markdown files in there, markdown with JavaScript expressions, MDX, right? Make your markdown even more powerful and messy. Standard HTML, if you have HTML that's been rendered somewhere else and you want to have them introduced into your new code base, you can have that, right? JavaScript and TypeScript as endpoints as well. Now I'm going to show you that in a wee second, right? And that stuff is proper funky, okay? Now, when it comes to Astro, we use file-based routing to generate your URLs when it comes to based on the layout and the structure of your pages directory. Now, the one benefit file-based routing gives beyond most other types of routing that I've seen is the ability for you to audit your endpoints from a top-down level just by looking at it. Now, that in itself is, from a security point of view, from an auditability point of view, that is really, really powerful. Now, a lot of text. I'll let you guys make through that as I'll try and do my best to explain file-based routing to you in a wee 10 seconds or less, right? Generally speaking, the way it works is that it goes declared. So for instance, post/create, right? It doesn't have any dynamic properties and parameters that surround it. These take the highest priority when it comes to routing. So if it's post.create or, you know, it's like about something, right? I'm sorry, names are just escaping me now. It's not on the screen, my imagination's not working, right? So it's like, but what we end up seeing when it comes to, like, for instance, over here, right, is these, perfect, right? So when it comes to these pages, right, I'm sorry, I realized there was a fair bit, but there's like, when it comes to these little dynamic brackets, right, this is where we give you the ability to actually have these as dynamic routes, dynamic parameters within your endpoints, okay? These little 3 dots here are the REST ones. So the way it works is highest priority, second priority, lowest priority. So unless these routes have been declared before, right, everything will just fall to the REST route, okay? Is that, everybody good with that? Yeah? Perfect, right? Now we have, this is how we create our routes in static sites, in static site generation, SSG mode, right? We use an API called getStaticPath that allows us to define our parameters. So where it goes dogs, we could go Clifford / Rover / Spot, right? And that then gets available to us using the Astro.params global API, and we can then inject that into our template. Now, you could have multiple file paths in the parameters as well, right, by following the same convention. So here will be en version 1 / info. Server-side mode, right, is really, really cool. This came in version 2, right? Astro started life as static site generation. Server-side mode, server-side rendering came in afterwards, and you could get your parameters directly without using the previous API that you've seen, the getStaticPath. You get that using the Astro params. Now, I promise you something funky with these dynamic endpoints, okay? Now, using .json.typescript, right, or that is how you specify your endpoints when it comes to like these dynamic endpoints. So you can send more data down, right, in different funky ways, right? Now, it gives you all the HTTP verbs are supported when it comes to making these dynamic endpoints in your JavaScript or TypeScript files, okay? And we support native web response and request APIs, right? So the request and response APIs that you will interact with in here is the same stuff that you would find documentation on when you go to MDN, okay? Now, this is that funky that I've shown, that I was promising you, okay? We're sending back a picture as an endpoint, right? All we're doing is just basically requesting it from here from the assets directory, but really speaking, when we were devising this, it was basically to get it from a CDN, right? And then passing some parameters from the request, and then be able to push that in. Request response it as from the get the buffer, and then send that back to the client, right? Now, build outputs, like I mentioned, we had static site generation and we had server-side rendering, right? This is all defined within your astro.config file. Now, astro.config files you're never going to spend your life in there, okay? We've actually got code mods and CLI tools that allow you to actually do the changes without you actually opening this file, okay? But generally speaking, you specify which output you want between static, hybrid, or server mode. Static mode, basically, this diagram just explains that everything comes out to APIs, right, to HTML or standard JavaScript, right? When you go to run npm run build, right, and it's just static, you'll get your HTML assets and everything else. In server-side rendering, this is where we introduced an adapter to basically give you out your server entry point. So every request made will hit this, and then this will give you back your response, okay? Now, the hybrid mode, right, is the difference between the two. It gives you the best of both worlds, static and server-side rendering as well. You could request this, right, simply by using one line at the top of your page, your file, const export const pre-render equals true. And that will just tell that route to be statically generated. Everything else is ran at request time, okay? One line at the top of your route. That's all it takes, especially in hybrid mode, right? Now, that adapter that you see me fly over, right? Now, that basically allows you to run on many different runtimes. You could run this on Deno, you could run this on Bun, you can run this on SST, sorry. Node, yeah, is there, right? And there's about 13 integrations, I believe. There's 100 more community integrations. A lot of these have been put together by community members themselves and some of the frameworks themselves as well. I'm going to quickly run through this. This is content collections.
We're
Done.
well over. I will talk about this.
Another time, right? Okay, so I do apologise. There is AstroDB. Let me just quickly finish up, right? AstroDB was launched last week. This is a brand new feature, right, for all of you to try and check out, right? You can do so by going to the astro.builddb site, and by all means, I do apologise I ran out of time, but this is so goddamn cool. It is libSQL built into Astro, right? And it allows you to have your own control over your own database. You don't need to set up a database. You don't need Docker anything, okay? And everything you need is included. It is powered by Drizzle under the hood, so we give you type-safe ORM included with Astro now, right? And yeah, Drizzle's amazing, right? They won't let us forget that either. And generally speaking, I would show you the code, but this is like the config for when you create your schema tables themselves, right? So everything's type safe, everything is provided for you, right? You go to seed it, and then you go inject it onto your page, right? Simple API call directly available for you in a single import, right? There is a full guide on how to use the Astro database as well, right, available to you. There's also Astro Studio that allows you to spin this up, a one-click deploy in the GUI online. Just literally go to astro.build, guys, and you'll be able to check all this out. Deep dive. Oh yeah, and it's free. Right? Our favorite language, right? You only pay for when you go over it, and it's not ridiculously expensive, so you're not going to burst the bank when it comes to that. View transitions, right? I've got one video, right, to show this off, right? Literally, it's 2 lines, right, of code that sticks this, that turns MPAs into SPAs, right? Daniel, I'm really sorry, bud, right? And so it's like, and this is the effect that it does. Now, big shout out to Maxi Ferreira for leading the charge when it came to the View Transitions API. A lot of his prototyping and sandboxing was done in Astro as well. And this is what it gives you, the ability to take multi-page applications that can give you that SPA-like feel as well, okay? And developer experience, we've got a dev bar. I am literally ripping the piss with this now, right? But I want to show you this. This is really cool, right? This allows you to basically inspect in development mode, right, your components, right, and allows you to have performance audibility, accessibility audibility as well, right? So it tells you if the attributes are missing, how to make things performant as well. And then there is what I live for, the Astro community. Literally, guys, I would like to welcome you all to the Astro community and into the Astro server at some point, right? You can do so by going into, like, there's themes, there's absolutely everything, right? This is the Astro Discord lounge, right? We have a $100,000 ecosystem fund, right? That is there to help support community patrons, maintainers in the open source project. And yeah, we give out monthly awards to everybody, right? And our open collective is there for you to join. Please join our community. Previous links, these are the links that I've just sped through, right? But generally speaking, everything you need, astro.build, astro.new for the playground, AstroDB, please guys do check this out. And yeah, start building with Astro today, please. Sorry about the thing, guys.
So this afternoon when you messaged me, you're like, there's a lot to cover. But there really is. No, it's good. I think it's great. I use Astro for my site and, in fact, the EdinburghJS sites because I think it's a framework that it feels like you're just writing stuff online, which is great. So
it's writing in code that you know.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to break the mental bank in order for you to actually get your stuff out there quickly. Cool. You know, thank you. Listen, guys, I do apologize.
So what we're going to do is we're going to skip questions quickly. So we can get Daniel speaking. If you want to grab another beer, soft drink, go to the bathroom, whatever, if you could be here in 3 minutes, 5 minutes, I'll come and chase you. Thank you. Cheers. We get for the live stream. We're live streaming. Yeah. Cool. Thanks for being prompt. The next speaker is Daniel, and this is interesting because you see these frameworks, and there are people who work on them. And I think sometimes we sort of forget that these tools that we use every day have real-life human beings behind them, sitting in their houses, working away. So Daniel's going to talk a little bit about the experiences building Nuxt. Please take it away, Daniel. Cheers.
Yeah, and thank you so much for having me. I was delighted when I moved to Edinburgh just a couple of months ago to find out that EdinburghJS was a thing, and I have basically plugged myself into probably more than Jamie and others would really want. So Discord, I'm there. EdinburghJS website, I'm there, and I'm delighted to be here talking tonight. Just a bit about some of the things that I've learned building Nuxt. And give you a very short demo of it. So this is a bit about me. I'm a full-time open source maintainer. I'm not employed. I'm sponsored by people in the community, by companies. I do some consultancy, but that's a very small proportion of what I do. I'm responsible for leading the Nuxt core team, which there are some amazing people on the Nuxt core team. I also have a few small projects you might check out. Page-speed.dev, you can check out the page speed of astro.build. It's very good. Regex.dev, it's a library for writing better regular expressions, which are type safe and compiled away into normal regular expressions at build time. Fontaine.sh gets rid of the layout shift when you're using custom web fonts. Elk.zone is a client for Mastodon, which is a distributed social network like Twitter, but free. Firstcommit.is, find your own first commit on GitHub or someone else's. And then WebTools is a Mastodon server, and Roe.dev is my website where you can find my contact details, some things I've written, and anything else that you might want to know about me. I have just moved to this place, which I'm sure you all recognize. That's the view out your front window, right? That's just my front window view. It's not. But I like to imagine it is. It is a beautiful city. And the reason I'm here is not work didn't call me here because I'm open source. I could live anywhere in the world, technically. But because it's such a lovely city. And I wanted to be based here with a vibrant community and museums and gigs and restaurants and things like that. So I'm still in the honeymoon phase. I don't know if it goes away at some point, but I'm very happy to be here. And this is I have a family, 4-year-old kid, a wife, and a cat who is extremely, will not let me do anything. I will say this is not unusual, and it's not straightforward to type on that thing with her there. This is Barley. Is her name, and she has a very plaintive mew. And so just a few words about me, because I'm really not that interesting or the main point here, but I'm a latecomer into tech, and particularly into this JavaScript world, the world of JavaScript frameworks. Before that, I was running a small software as a service company, which itself grew spontaneously out of a marketing agency, or a message agency, which was all about expressing things clearly. And before that, I was a vicar. So I've not come out of tech at all. So if you want to talk to me about unusual career paths, I'm there for it. But basically, when we decided to shut down the SaaS company called Parent Scheme, I was already by that point contributing to Nuxt. That was I think I only started contributing to Nuxt about 2020, something like that. And the first tech conferences I went to were in COVID. And so that's been the extent of my involvement in the tech world. And that might be similar to some of you, or some might be much newer, some longer. That's totally the case. But basically at that point, I was asked, well, could we sponsor you to work on Nuxt? And that began my involvement on a full-time basis, and I only started leading the core team about just over a year ago. So for a quick question, I want to know if you have used Nuxt before, and you don't raise your hand. That probably would work fine, but I just wanted to try out my little WebSocket demo here. Hopefully it's going to work on the Wi-Fi. You should just be able to scan one of those options if you can, and it should. Now I'm very clever because I've not just said no, I've said not yet. So I probably didn't notice that. I slipped that one in there. I thought that would be a... Actually, I'm really amazed. 8 people here have used Nuxt. 10! I was not expecting that. I was thinking this was a... And 38 people are going to. That's remarkable. That's amazing. Okay, thank you for letting me know. Well, what is Nuxt? If you're wondering, goodness me, he's talking about Nuxt, and someone has to tell him that we have no idea what it is. It's a framework for building web apps. A lot of things, if I were to go into the details, would be similar to Astro. We're in the same space in the world of JavaScript frameworks. It's built on Vue.js for the front end and a server rendering framework called Nitro for the back end. We actually built it for Nuxt. We rebuilt Nuxt entirely we just launched Nuxt 3 just over a year ago. And we rebuilt a lot of things for it and actually spun them out. So they're not just Nuxt. Now they power other frameworks. So there's an AngularJS framework called Analog, which is built on Nitro as well. There's, if you've heard of Solid Start, that's also built on Nitro. And lots of the technologies, we very much don't want to be holding onto these things for ourselves. That's one way to go. It's like building your own empires is all very well, but actually you go much further when you go together with other people and other frameworks. And so that's very much something we believe in. But Nuxt is about having a zero-effort start, so making it as easy as possible to get going, to have a good developer experience, to have the best practices built in, but to be able to take full control later on. This is just a snapshot of where we are at the moment. So we're at just over 51,000 stars on GitHub. We have about 2.84 million downloads a month. And our adoption of the latest version of Nuxt, Nuxt 3, which took a while in the making, and we had some pain in the process of doing a full rewrite. There's not a line of code that remains the same. Don't do that. Never. Do not do that. If someone says, I think it would be a really good idea to rebuild our entire tech stack, say no. Don't do that. Anyway, but we have about 60% adoption now of Nuxt 3, which is really exciting to see. These people are the ones who made it possible, because Nuxt is very much a community project. So we have over 600 contributors. And I would bet you that there are people in this room who are on that list as well. We have a modules ecosystem, so everything about Nuxt is customizable. And by the way, this is not incidental. So we have lots of different modules. They can hook into everything from implementing an integration with a CMS or some authentication module or way of doing things, to a dev tool, to something like Tailwind CSS. And across them, we have lots of downloads and maintainers and contributors and stars, and you can get the data yourself by fetching that particular URL. But one of the things that I would observe in terms of looking at communities that I see as being successful ones is the fact that it isn't about one way. So very much for us at Nuxt, I think probably because we come from each of the core team with our own different backgrounds, we're very much coming from this assumption that we don't have all the answers in terms of how people would want to do things or might possibly want to do things. So exposing the ability for end users to make things their own or build deep integrations I think is very important. And if you see something like the success of Vite, now the success of Vite has just absolutely, it's incredible to see. Just look at the chart of downloads or stars or anything you care to see. And I think one of the things that makes Vite so successful is the fact that people can build on top of it. So people can use Vite to build better and different and other things. And very much, I mean, I feel basically building Nuxt, I'm building a hammer that people can use. It's part of a toolbox that people can use to build other things that I would never imagine or dream of, which is incredible and really wonderful to see. And I really can't take credit for that. And I think that's probably true for all of us building frameworks. Like we're building tools, and we are all in this room tool users. We are sort of artisans or craftspeople, and we're sort of making amazing or useful or beautiful or like stunning things with those tools. So make things that other people can make other things with. That's the space in which Nuxt lives. Another thing that's very dear to us, apart from the idea that we should be built upon, is that we should be open and free. So this is a list of all of the different integrations that we support, most of them zero config. So you can deploy a Nuxt site to Vercel or AWS Amplify or DigitalOcean or Firebase. You can use Playwright or VTest or Jest or Cucumber. You can store your database in Bun SQLite or Cloudflare D1 or PlanetScale or Neon or MySQL or Terso or Vercel KV. You can use any of these I'm sorry, there are too many to list. How many are there? There are over 90 providers with all the range from KV store to database to images to deployment providers, because we're not aligned with any one of these providers. We are open, we are independent, and we believe in giving people choice. So for any of these providers, for example, the deployment providers or the database providers or the font providers, what we would want is for people to be able to make choices for themselves based on their own needs. I'm sorry, am I getting a bit heated? I care about it. I grew up in, my first computing experiences were like trying to hack on Linux distributions and trying to figure out like how to make things work free of the tyranny of Microsoft Word at the time. Microsoft's a very different beast now. But it really matters to have the ability to choose and switch and move if your project needs you to do that. And I think it matters as well from a commercial point of view. I want to say a couple of words about developer experience. So a developer experience is an unadulterated good. It's purely good, I think. I don't know if anyone disagrees with that. It might be one of my spicy takes, which end up basically not being spicy. But I think developer experience is just pure good. Because when you are in the flow zone, when you are actually able to feel like you are on top of the world, that any idea that comes into your head is able to be translated into sort of implementation, it becomes a virtuous circle. So the feedback loop is that the more you're able to make something the case, the better you're able to think and refine and make it better, as opposed to encountering friction, which stops you from even realizing that first implementation and having to go back to the drawing board. So here's a question for you. When have you felt most productive? Just imagine it in your own head, a moment in time when you have felt particularly productive or on fire or like you are in the zone. Have you got it? So this is my theory that basically that moment is when you maximize your creativity and minimize the constraint upon you. So the things that are going to get in the way, whether that's information that you need to know, or whether that's stuff that you have to do, or tooling that you have to configure, or all that kind of thing. So as constraint goes down, this graph is terrible probably. It's meant to communicate, if it doesn't immediately do that, that the point where we want to be is a minimum of constraint, which is where we also find a maximum of creativity. That's the idea. And that's the aim, really, of the developer experience we're seeking to create with Nuxt. And I'll just demo a little bit about what it looks like to start a Nuxt project. And I only just released a version of Nuxt yesterday, so if anything breaks, it is actually my fault. So to start with, we have this, oh yeah, there we go. Testing that it worked in advance. Okay, let's create a new one. We have a little CLI called Nuxty. We support, like, obviously any package manager, but I'll use Bun. Do people use Bun? The Bun package manager? Oh, it's fast. That's what it's got going for it. Obviously, there's the Bun runtime as well. PNPM is what I do use mostly in my projects. So this is a Nuxt application. It's pretty simple. So we've got a server directory, a public directory, an app. Oh, and we should start a dev server. And that would just, oops, closed. That's just going to fire you up with a welcome page. So in your Nuxt application, this is actually quite similar, I guess, to the Astro file, although it's Vue, so it comes a few years before. And that is we have a sort of HTML bit, and we'll have a script bit, which is where we have our scripting. And we could also have, if we wanted, a little style block too. I'm going to make this look a little bit more beautiful, so I'm actually going to kill the dev server immediately and install a little CSS framework. Actually, I'm not PNPM, Bun. Actually, I won't do that. I'm going to install Tailwind CSS. Do people like Tailwind CSS? I'll do that. Actually, I'm going to use a new tool we've got. Actually, I'm not going to. I'm going to use a new tool. I'm just going to say module add Tailwind CSS. And that is going to basically go ahead and download that dependency. We have a Nuxt integration for Tailwind. I mentioned our modules ecosystem. And it's actually going to configure it for me in my Nuxt config as well. If you do want to see some of those integrations, there are a couple of different places you can go. So Tailwind, it should be up and going for us. Let's test it out. This should be. And what we really need, like a class font bold. Is that enough to prove that it works? Oh, I have to save it. I normally have my autosave on like every millisecond. And so I've gotten used to that, but I thought that would be bad for tonight because it would. Anyway, so this should, I have to save it, right? Okay, this should work. Save. There we go. So Tailwind CSS is up and running. Uppercase, is that a thing? Yeah, okay. We have quite a lot of things in Nuxt. The aim is to reduce that friction that I'm talking about. So we do things like, as much as possible, we give a lot of type information that's accessible not just in your IDE, but also when you're running TypeScript to check. We do that by taking full control of the TypeScript config that your project extends. So here's an example of what we can do. So let's just create a quick little API endpoint. And we're going to, I don't know, return foobar. And now if I want to get that data, I'm going to use a little helper function called, for goodness sake, I can't type, called $fetch. Now $fetch is going to allow, oh, this needs to be a static block. $fetch is going to unwrap the response for me. If it's a JSON, it's just going to directly return it. And it's also fully typed, so it knows the routes that are available within my application. And actually, it knows the return type of them as well. So it can actually tell me that the type is going to be that. And if I want to, I could then use that data in my template. And that will just appear there for me. I can even do things like use view composable. So I can use a utility called useFetch, which is going to make sure that this data is fetched on the server and not on the client, which I guess prevents double running of code, which is probably what we want. And when you produce a static site, it also extracts that data from the build time and creates it at generate time, so you aren't actually running that in production. Quite a lot of things in Nuxt are made available by creating folders and directories. So if I want to create a folder that's usable throughout my app, I could say something like hello world, and I could make this component hello world. I could then just go ahead and use that here. And my IDE even knows that it exists, So when I save it, it's just going to pop up there for me. If that component took props, for example, so define props, I'm going to say I need a title. I could then just pop back here. And if I'm going to pass, say, a number, that's not going to work because it's got to be a string. And this is how Vue does strings. So there are a lot of benefits that we have by being in control of the environment that you're in, the TypeScript environment, that hopefully will make developer experience better. We can do things like have a plugin. In Nuxt, plugins are used to perform global setup. So you could do something that you need to do only once. They can also provide things to your application. So you might have a singleton auth. Thank you, Copilot. That would do very nicely. And so you might have some helper functions that you want to put in place there. You might want to use them. Probably you're not going to use them directly in the template, but I just want to show that basically you do get that type safety sort of right the way through. And so if you're ending up with a typo, you do actually see that immediately. There's other things as well. So probably you would expect if you create a pages directory and move this into pages index, that's going to immediately create a root that's going to be indexed. And if I go to about, it's going to give me a 404. But I could do something like create log id slug.view. And then that's going to be accessible at log 2, 3, 4, whatever. And that's going to work at that particular place in exactly the same kind of way. So I could do something like root params, and you'll see id 3, slug 4. We have the same kind of pattern on the server. So that server API directory that I was talking about. But you can imagine what that would look like. We've got other things as well. So we have not just components, we have layouts and a built-in Nuxt layout component. There's Nuxt link, ways of going through the app. But really the aim in all of these places is that when you create a file or a folder, it unlocks additional possibility without sort of constraining you or requiring things to be set up in advance. And then we try as much as possible in your IDE to tell you about what's available to you. So for example, we have auto imports. When you create an event handler, you don't have to import it specifically. And there's a whole host of other utilities that you can use. Things like maybe I want to get the query or a request header or a request host. Older frameworks like Express had these built in. So actually, they were not tree shakeable. You might have called res.json or something like that. It was built into Express, and it would return a JSON object. But you couldn't get rid of it if you didn't use it. The strategy we've taken is to make as much as possible this imported only at point of use, so that it's when you use this functionality that it actually allows you for it to be part of your build, but otherwise it is not. So the basic minimal app is quite small. But the other thing that we've done is we have dev tools. So we've created the Nuxt dev tools, and we're delighted that they have started inspiring other frameworks and also a movement across React, Solid, and so on to actually do this kind of thing. And what we would love to see is for some of these fundamentals to be shared across frameworks. So exactly as I was talking about for Nitro, we're able to go faster and better together. But Nuxt DevTools will tell you things about your app. So of course, it does allow you to click directly into a component and go directly to the file. But it also displays things like unclick that. Displays things like the modules that are used in your app. I'm just going to use you can see Tailwind is here. And I could also install a new module. So you could see some of the modules that exist. And I could very quickly say, OK, I'm going to need to add, let's see, the test utils module or plausible analytics or something like that. And I could just click that. It's going to tell me what it's going to do it's going to run that command. It's going to update my Nuxt config. And actually, it's not going to work straight away, or it might. Oh, it does. The first time you run it, it won't work. It will say it needs to authenticate. And you'll have to paste a token to make sure that it's you installing the package and not someone on the same network as you. but I've obviously done that for this machine. So there we go. I installed a module. It happened in the background. It updated my Nuxt config. So again, the idea is that I'm not being taken out of the context in which I'm working in order to achieve something. I'm doing it right away and there in that moment. We've got a lot of other bits of magic that Nuxt has done. So Tailwind CSS here has injected its own dev tools. So it's now giving me a visibility into all the different utilities that Tailwind has given to my app. Different packages do different things. Actually, there's one I just created the other day called Nuxt Fonts. Let's see if I can show you that, because I think that's pretty cool too. So Nuxt Fonts is a way of enabling you to use web fonts with zero config. So they enable, and again, it's all in line with what we're trying to do here. So if I open, what is it, index.view? No, I'm in here. Say if I wanted to have some CSS like this, I would say I want the font family to be, what's a web font that exists somewhere out there? Roboto. Okay. Roboto. And what that has done in the background is it has, actually I'm not sure I'm going to be able to see it just by inspecting it here. Network, that'll be a better way of seeing it. What that has done is it has found the details for Roboto, proxied it locally into my project so that when I deploy this, it's not going to be making requests to Google Fonts. It's all in my project. It's calculated font fallbacks so that in the gap between when the flicker is something you only get on dev mode, don't worry about that. But when I load the project, the gap between when my native system font is showing and Roboto loads from the servers will be quite minimal. It will reduce layout shift using that library that I talked about, Fontaine, which, by the way, works on any framework, even on Astro. And you can go and use it today. And basically, that is all happening for you automatically in the background. But because that's happening in the background, we want people to be able to understand what's going on. And so we have, for example, a dev tool, which will expose the fact that Roboto has been installed. It will show you the fonts that are being made available to your browser, and it will actually show you the CSS that was generated and injected into your page. So as much as, like, this is just an example of the sort of the aim, is that when developing, I shouldn't have to be taken out of my context in order to make something happen. Like, if I could do this, I could go to fonts.google.com, I could open the CSS file that they tell me to put in my head, I could copy the CSS out, I could put it in my page, I could download the files, I could put them in my public directory so that I don't have a request to a third-party origin that would slow down my website. But all of that takes me out of the moment. It adds friction, it reduces my creativity, and makes me less effective as a developer. Now, I think, okay, do I have, okay. We can hang out. You really shouldn't have said that, Jamie. We're going to hang out. Okay, that's excellent. So there are lots of things. If you're interested in knowing how Nuxt works under the hood, for example, you can check out the inspect module, which is one of my favorites when actually building Nuxt. And that is, you can see the build pipeline of all of your code. So for example, this is the file that I wrote. And then this bit adds a little data attribute so I can click to go to the file. And you can see it's added that little data view inspector attribute, telling me where the file and the line number. And then this bit transforms it from a view single file component into JavaScript. And then this bit adds like a magic key so I can match up the request to that API from the client to the server to the client so it doesn't happen again. And then this bit adds the auto import of that composable that I'm using so that it works and is tree shaken properly. And then there's this other bit Vite is doing here that makes sure that some of these utilities in development mode are properly processed. So you can see every step from the code you write into the JavaScript that ends up in your, as close as possible to your bundle. This is just a dev environment. So that's quite cool if you want to see how things work under the hood. And there's quite a lot more, from the configuration that's overridable at runtime to the data that's being passed from server to client, to the composables that are available to me, and even just the ones that I'm using in my app. I can see the components that I've created, as well as the ones that are made available through Nuxt itself. I can see the pages and the routing in my application, and I can even click to go to them. So I can change the route based on programmatically deciding where I want to go in my app. I think. I could actually add middleware. I didn't mention this before, but you can add authentication middleware just by creating a middleware folder in your project. And again, you get type-safe access for that. So if I did something like middleware auth and create that file, it would return false if you're not allowed to go there. But then I could say in my page that this is going to have middleware, and that's going to, there's only one at this point, auth. And so I could specify that that middleware is going to protect that page, for example. Let's see, what else is there that might be useful to know about? The timeline is quite a cool feature. So I am going to enable it. It's going to change my configuration because it's an experimental feature right now. But that is now going to give me a little timeline of all the events that happen in my, I don't think any of them are happening. Let's try again. Yeah. Of all the events that are happening in my app. So every one of these composables that is called, I'll be able to see the trace and what it's called with. So that this useFetch, for example, you can see when it was called, how long it took to run. Quite useful things if you want to inspect your app. Because we don't want these things to be front and center. We want to get rid of the friction, but it still needs to be accessible for you if you want to know what's going on under the hood. I'm aware we've created a beautiful app that probably I will not be showing off to anybody. But I just want to show you under the hood what it looks like to build and deploy this somewhere. So if I were to build my app, I could just say Nuxt build. That's what's going to happen under the hood if I run build. This is by default going to create a node server that's optimized for, and those are the fonts downloading. It's going to create a node server that's optimized for fast cold starts. So in Nuxt 2, we had a traditional server that was built for a VPS that goes online. The server responds to loads of requests. But in Nuxt 3, we re-envisioned what this would look like in a serverless environment. So Nuxt, so it's optimized for fast starts. It lazy loads the chunks of the server code that are required to make it really fast. Nuxt 2, cold start was 300 milliseconds in a bare minimum project. In Nuxt 3, it's less than 1 millisecond on my computer here. So it's aiming to be really fast when it's deployed to a serverless environment. This one is a node server, so I could start it like that. Those are being requested by the dev tools in the background. I could also build it for another preset. So I could build it for, say, Cloudflare pages. Actually, it's just Cloudflare. And that's going to do exactly the same kind of thing. Now, in a CI environment, Nuxt will detect where it is. So on Vercel, it will know, oh, I have to produce Vercel-shaped output. On Cloudflare, it will know it has to produce Cloudflare-shaped output, and so on. So I could actually, produce this Cloudflare build. Then I'm going to run Wrangler, which is Cloudflare's way of previewing on your local machine the build to make sure that it works. And then I could open that, and that's now running in a Cloudflare environment, but it's running locally. But it would do exactly the same if it were in production. And that is very much part of any of the deployment targets that we support. So you could see some of them, for example, on the deploy section of the Nitro website. And a lot of those are zero config. So everything from a bun runtime to Dino to, I don't know, Edgio or deploy to Firebase or StormKit or whatever. I've got to say that the most important thing about Nuxt, though, isn't the technology, as far as I'm concerned, but it's the community. Because I'm relatively new to open source and to contributing to tech at all. And Nuxt has a really welcoming community. We've just released a new website with better syntax, so you can hover over the code examples and you get TypeScript in your editor, like in the browser, so you can explore a little bit further. We have a Discord, which I would please come. I'm there all the time, so if you come and just say my name, I will appear as if summoned. And GitHub too. I read all the issues. That may be sad, but I do it anyway. And we also have this Nuxters website, which may not be for now, but if you ever do want to get involved, you can get like a Discord badge by going to that website. But I particularly want to say that if, and I don't care about Nuxt, like if you want to get involved in Nuxt, that is amazing, but the empires are not my thing, and I don't think empires are good for like any of us, like at a deep level. But if you do want to get involved in open source, or you have any questions, I have an open diary on my website. If you go to roe.dev, I would very happily sit down, just have a Zoom call for 10 minutes. And you can book that anytime. If that would ever be of use or help, it might not. But if it would be, and particularly if you look at open source community, and maybe that's not something that you're familiar with, and you think, actually, I'm not sure that the people I see there look like me, or maybe I don't feel like I would belong, please book a call with me. I would love to talk to you and tell you that actually you would be very welcome. And even if that's advice on something else, please. Nuxt, we've got documentation on nuxt.com, and you can find most of the things I've talked about. If you have ideas for building something or doing something differently, I would love to hear those. If you want to build something with Nuxt and you need help, please ask me. I would love to help you do that. And if you are trying it for the first time, you have a superpower, because you will be seeing through eyes that I don't have, because I'm building these things. So I would really love to hear from you if you think there are things that could be done better or differently. That would be incredible. Those are just a very few things, and I'm aware it was a super quick demo. I basically have the best job in the world because I get to do my hobby all the time. So I really love it. And one of the things that I'm particularly glad is to have been able to come and present some of the things that I spend my time doing. So thank you very much.
Thank you, that was great. I think one of the things I really love is watching people code. It's sort of insight into how people are set up, and it's almost like an athlete or like a chef preparing a dish, And I think there's something about that, like knowing your tools. Like they often talk about chefs having their tools and their food and their like stations set out to be able to have a certain fluency in what it is you're doing. And I think that's kind of reflected in what you're trying to build there with the dev tools. We have time for a couple of quick questions. Does anybody have any questions about Nuxt or working in open source? We're going to have a mic for the live stream, so just speak into the mic, you won't be amplified. So.
It's not a particularly technical question, but what were the two spikes on the timeline diagram that you showed where they dipped down? What was that?
The spikes were NPM's statistics are not entirely reliable, and so there were several days this year when no package in the NPM ecosystem was downloaded at all. In fact, one was like over a week. And so those were those spikes. They weren't particularly us. They were just reflective of NPM's statistics. And that's the other thing, by the way. Take all of these things with a pinch of salt, because NPM downloads, so stars, like they're a vanity metric. They don't really tell you who's using it. And NPM downloads don't either. So for example, almost no developers in China will contribute to those download numbers at all. Because they'll be using mirrors and so on. So and also if you have your own cache. So I'm just saying. I tell myself that, like, before I start putting too much weight on like the number of millions or whatever, or hundreds. But those are the spikes.
Thank you. Cheers.
Any other questions? Cool. Okay, off the back.
Yeah, we are experiencing some memory leaks with the international Nuxt module currently, and I'd like to know if you have some solution to detect memory leaks on Nuxt with the inspector and the DevTools.
Yeah. The tricky thing is that the memory, so the internationalization module in Nuxt, I'm very familiar with, I've been following and in fact I've been debugging as well. The issue is that the dev tools are running on the client and the leak is on the server. So it's very difficult to do that with anything but the node inspector. If you ever want to debug a memory leak, reconsider your career, but if you want to debug a memory leak, the best thing is to run like the node process with inspect and then connect to it with Chrome DevTools. And that helps. It's still very painful. But the issue, I mean, I can tell you, as far as I'm aware, what the issues are, and I can give you some particular tips if you want with regard to that module. Yeah, but you're still experiencing with the latest version it's released.
We are in an upgrading process
currently,
okay. So we hope.
Yeah, I think I was talking to Bobby, and he was very optimistic about that at the moment.
Good to get
May it be.
feedback and issues that you've been probably on GitHub or something.
Well, it's honestly it's amazing. Like speaking just from an open source maintainer point of view, like meeting people who like are little avatars on GitHub and like you recognize them. Like Inesh here, for example, like it was anyway. Like I don't recognize you from your avatar, which is quite a. It's like you can't. It's not a face, but it's very nice.
Cool. On that note, can we say thank you to both our speakers for this evening, Daniel and Pleasant. A couple of little housekeeping announcements. The first of which is that we want to try and connect people in the community. So Daniel was talking about having an open calendar. Victoria is going to talk about having an idea with mentors.
Very much. Yeah, that was a lovely segue to what we kind of want to get going here at the different Edinburgh, and GlasgowJS communities, is precisely that thing of like being able to meet up with people and get those conversations going, because sort of any question that anyone comes here with, any area of tech that you might want to be improving on, I guarantee that there is someone here who can help you with that. But at these meetup events, it can be kind of difficult to know who to talk to, like who's here and what kind of advice they can offer. So in that spirit of open calendars, getting people talking, people being willing to sort of chat, we want to make it as easy as possible for those conversations to happen. So we want to trial a kind of mentorship program. Makes it sound kind of official. I think we want it to be a bit more casual than that, but sort of the idea would be that we have an area on the website where we just put up like a picture, a brief bio, areas of interest that specific people would be willing to have like Zoom chats with people about. And then sort of we're doing a toss-up between two different ways that people can get in touch with you. One would be that you dump a link to an open calendar and people can just sort of book directly through that. Or an alternative is they can sort of get through us, get in touch with us through email, and we'll sort of forward you their details. But in both cases, it would be just a nice way of people being able to reach out, like have a coffee, have a Zoom call, pick your brains for like 20 minutes, maybe something a bit more regular and long-term if that's what you want. But yeah, so if that would be something that you're interested in, we're looking for volunteers to be part of the first like trial run, volunteer mentors, who you can just sort of put your contact details up and see what is the best format for that to happen. So if that sounds like something that you want to do, get in touch with me. I'll be hanging around. I'll be at the pub. Talk to Jamie. I guess sort of
many ways of getting in touch.
Exactly. Go on the Discord.
Get in touch with someone somehow involved with this. Yeah.
Carrier pigeon. See how it goes. And we'll send you some details about how we'd want that to work. But yeah, so think about it. We'd love to have you, and I think that would be a really cool way to just get those conversations happening.
Cool. And thank you for kicking this off. Programming note, next month, April, we have got Kimberly talking about kind of the history of the web, maybe even a little bit pre-JavaScript. I think that will be really interesting. We've had some like kind of history talks before, and it's good to see where the tools that we're using today have come from. So keep an eye on the meetup group for that. I will get around to posting the details of that soon. You might see in the meetup group, I'm now cross-posting the live stream from Glasgow to here and the live stream from here to Glasgow. It also means that the meetup RSVP for the actual event is in real life only, which means we get a wait list back, which means that you automatically get a ticket if you're next on the list. Thank you to FanDuel, to 2i, to Scotland Is, and to KPV Lab, and to Alan for actually doing the live streaming. We appreciate all of you for your help in putting these events on. After this event, some people I'm sure will be at the pub just along the road, the Fountainbridge Fox. Please do come and join us for a beer and a chat about JavaScript. Thank you for coming tonight, and see you next month. Cheers.